Rapid reaction, Iowa falls to Oregon 80-78 at Carver-Hawkeye Arena. Iowa now in real trouble of missing the Big Ten tournament. March situations have returned. Today, Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you watch podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube or listen to us on the audio side. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you. If you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe. Just takes a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. 80-78, the final. Iowa falls to Oregon. Missed opportunities in this one in a game where at times it felt like Iowa was going to be able to find a way to pull this out. At times, it looked like they were dead team walking. And at other times, it was just a play here, play there. The bounces going Iowa's way. And you thought this was going to happen. But eventually, it does not. Iowa gets a shot at the horn to win it. They go back to Josh Dix once again. I love the play call by Fran McCaffrey. I love what he drew up because a majority of the time, I love what Fran McCaffrey does offensively, and it was an absolute beauty. The problem? Well, there's a big guy waiting on the other side. And Biddle, a guy that I didn't know much about coming into this one. He'd been around for 4 years, something that is a rarity in college basketball at any level anymore, but certainly at the power conference level to have a guy that has been around for as long as he is at the same school. Gets the block shot after a monster performance from Nate Biddle. The block shot doesn't even get to the rim. Then we had maybe one of the more miraculous plays, if that would have went down. Evan Bronze, who had a game of a lifetime in this one. He had a shot off that deflection, threw it up off the rim, kind of turned around in midair and got it off the front rim, but no good. And that's how this one comes to a close. Iowa falls to 80-78. Coming up today, we're going to be talking with Tom Kaker. We're going to talk some basketball with him. We're going to take a look forward to this weekend's women's matchup as they welcome in top 5 ranked UCLA to town, even a little Iowa wrestling and some football talk coming up with Tom Kaker from HawkeyeReport.com, and a big weekend in front of us. But a look back at what we saw at Carver-Hawkeye Arena. A couple of different things that you have to go to. And I want to start first, the return of Drew Thelwell. You know, you're hopeful that he was going to be able to make a strong push, be back out there. You could see how limited he is, though, with that ankle injury. And what they say, it was the size of a softball not too long ago. And you could see this was not the same Drew Thelwell that we've seen throughout the course of this season. He wasn't exactly right. Traore had a couple of moments in there overall. Still feels like the game as he's getting more and more minutes, just a little bit too quick for him. That'll slow down. Still excited about his upside and what he can be. Again, this team was put on the backs of Josh Dix and Peyton Sanford, and for the most part, they were right there. Dembele had some good moments again, but this is going to be remembered, I think, more than anything about Evan Bronze. An Iowa City kid, goes on, plays in the Missouri Valley in the Ohio Valley Conference at Belmont, comes back, looks like it's going to be for a year, turns out to be 2 years. And you can see right away with Evan Bronze, he is an elite athlete. I mean, this guy can jump out of the gym. He has physicality. He has some of the big things that you want as a backup post player. He's going to come in there. He can make some physical plays. He's not elite at anything. He's not a great shooter by any means, but he has shown the ability with that athleticism. He can go in there. He can mix it up. He can make some plays, and that's what you've got out of him. But this was not expected. He's a dunker. He's that, but to play at this level. So you go back to the game before. His Iowa career high came the last time out against Maryland when he had 6 points in that one. Now he goes 4 of 4 from the floor. They didn't count that final shot. He did get it off before the buzzer. If it would have went, obviously would have counted. So I guess that helps his field goal percentage. But how about this? 7 of 9 at the free throw line. That was an eye-opening number as well. Going back to his time at Belmont, he was a 66% shooter from the free throw line. His final season there goes at the free throw line here, 7 of 9, 3 rebounds in the game, has an assist, a couple of block shots. Maybe we should have been seeing a little bit more of Evan Bronze. Now, he's only 6'9" at the center position. That's in the Big Ten, going to be incredibly difficult. But we talked about those times. Do they need to go a little bit bigger? We looked back throughout the course of the season, how many times that Peyton Sanford was playing the power forward position and was just physically manhandled in this one. Great to see. It would have been even better, obviously, if Iowa got the win. Had 2 layups and just spun out. It's that kind of season. That's what we're going through right now. It's just everything that can go wrong is Murphy's Law is happening. Iowa's now lost 5 out of their last 6. They have lost 8 of their last 10. It's circling the drain. And if this is the end of an era for Fran McCaffrey, you hate to see that. We'll have plenty of time for speculation about that. More than anything, just want to look back at the game, and we'll talk some more big picture stuff coming up here with Tom Kaker. Now, Washington this weekend. This is a must-win for Iowa. Iowa has to win this game because we've talked about it all throughout the course of the season. What Iowa has in their final 4 games is as daunting as anybody in the Big Ten. At Illinois, at Northwestern, home for Michigan State, and at Nebraska. Nebraska is a completely different team in their building. Illinois, well, they're Jekyll and Hyde, but still, we know about the talent that they have. Michigan State, well, they're battling for a conference crown, and the one quote-unquote layup in there is the Northwestern, who's going to be out for revenge after Iowa was able to beat them on a Josh Dix buzzer beater back in December. 14-12 on the year, 5-10 in the Big Ten. And the question now becomes for Iowa. If you don't win the game against Washington, I think you're going to be in big, big trouble of making the Big Ten tournament because it's incredibly difficult to envision where Iowa's going to be and what they're going to be able to do on that front. Here's another thing. So I've mentioned this one before. Write it down if you're listening. bball.notnothing.net. This is the website that you can play around with who wins the rest of the games remaining in the regular season, and then it spits out what the bracket's going to look like for the Big Ten tournament. They also have set up just if all the favorites win. We know that's not going to happen, but if that does happen, Iowa finishes in a tie for 14th place with Northwestern, Minnesota. But as we know, 15 teams make the Big Ten tournament. Iowa would be on the outside looking in that scenario. They would be the number 16 team and the first team out of the Big Ten bracket. That's tough. I mentioned at the top, March situations. For youngsters out there, if you don't remember what March situations are, when Steve Alford was trying to explain his poor record, explain the disappointment of his career at the University of Iowa, at one point he brought up March situations. Not NCAA tournaments, March situations. We're back. Our situation now for March is not about the NCAA tournament. Our March situation is about just qualifying for the Big Ten tournament. My, how the mighty have fallen. Tom Kaker from HawkeyeReport.com. He stops in. We talk plenty of Hawkeyes, football, basketball, women's basketball, even a little wrestling. We'll do that as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Attention, Locked On Hawkeye fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happen under the table. Fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes that they love. Now with Roy, you get to be part of the change and support Hawkeye athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, receive exclusive content from the athletes you back. The best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Hawkeye athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players.
We're back on Overtime Iowa.
He is Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com, part of On 3, as he joins us today. Mr. Kakert, normally on a Friday, but Scott Docterman, he's got the tough duty of being in New Orleans, so we had to move him around a little bit this week. Thanks for joining us a day early, Tom.
Well, it's probably appropriate since we had a men's basketball last night. So
it works well. It absolutely does. And a game that was there for the taking. There were moments and they shot at the end. Yeah, it got blocked. Biddle, that dude was playing out of his mind throughout the course of that game. But dude made a play. I like the play call. I like going to Dix, who's obviously proven he can be a shot maker late in games, as he did earlier this year against Northwestern. It didn't go down. Kind of a microcosm, though, of this Iowa team, right? There's some good things, but ultimately not good enough.
Close but no cigar.
Yes.
Is kind of the theme for this year for Iowa men's basketball, and mixing in some really rough losses, but some good moments too. They did go to Rutgers and win recently, so we give them credit. But I think they played in those two road games they played 3 good halves and then one really bad half, and that was at Maryland. They played one really good half there and then one not so good. But now they're firmly on the bubble of the Big Ten tournament.
Wow.
Because there's for fans who don't know, there's only going to be 15 Big Ten teams out of the 18 that get to go to Indianapolis, and right now Iowa is probably going to have to beat Washington and maybe have to beat Northwestern in order to, I think, feel comfortable that they're in.
And using a website that I know you know incredibly well, Tom, bball.notnothing.net, where you projected forward. If you just go by the Sagarin rankings, that's the rankings that he uses over there, and project the way that this thing finishes out, Iowa finishes in a 3-way tie for 14th place, part of the top 15. However, because of tiebreakers, Iowa would be on the outside looking in behind Northwestern and Minnesota. Of course, Minnesota has the tiebreaker against them. Their round robin record would go the way of Northwestern and Minnesota. Iowa would be out. Let's go down that path, Tom. If Iowa doesn't make the Big Ten tournament, does that change the equation at all for Beth Getz and what her decision is going to be at the end of the year?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because even if you squeak in, I mean, it's squeaking in.
Right.
It's, you're not going to be in Indianapolis long, more than likely. And I think she was not obviously she wasn't there last night because they have athletic director meetings down in New Orleans where Scott Docterman's down eating, all kinds of great food.
Right.
And let's not, he's not working really. He's just going down there to have great food in New Orleans. But anyway, but she's been at, I think, every men's home game that I can recall, and that I've been at, and I've been at, I think, all but maybe one of them this year, and that was because we were down in Nashville for one of them. So, it's a financial decision, money. It always is, and that's what's going to come down to, I think, as much as record and as much as achievement, all that's wrapped into one. But it's also about money, lack of attendance, that sort of stuff, and that's what's going to resonate, I think, with her moving forward.
We have talked about this a lot in Iowa basketball, the financial part of it. I think for most people, I would say a majority of people, the headliners and the most realistic candidates out there are Ben McCullum at Drake and Darren DeVries, if you can talk him into coming back home after a year at West Virginia. But both of those guys, neither of them are dynamic personalities. They're not rah-rah guys, excite the fan base kind of personalities. And do you need a guy like that, this fractured Iowa fan base, to get them not just back inside the building and getting ticket sales going, but just to reinvigorate the fan base? Do you need somebody with a different kind of, I guess, basketball DNA and just kind of the way they're wired? A guy maybe more like a Steve Forbes that has that kind of personality.
There is something to be said for that. To have he's not coming, but like a Bruce Pearl,
yes.
Type personality, guy who's gonna, and Forbes, he's done that too. Where I've seen things with him where he's out on the Wake Forest campus, like handing out tickets and stuff like that. He's got a little P.T. Barnum to him.
Yeah.
That I think you need, and let's not lose sight of this too. That they are also going to embark on a $65 million renovation of Carver-Hawkeye Arena. and you need the men's basketball coach to be kind of the front-facing guy for that in a lot of ways to help spearhead that because, I'm sure Jen Jensen will be involved. I'm sure Tom Brands will be involved, but the men's basketball coach has to kind of lead that charge too, and along with Beth Getz and her team. So that's why it's important. Fran has done a terrific job at Iowa. I think he's resurrected the program, got it back on its feet, got it to a Dr. Tom Davis level. I think, Trent, you would agree with me on that, right?
Absolutely. In hindsight, I think a lot of people overrate the Dr. Tom era, and certainly, after Roy and BJ and Ed graduated, this is what Iowa basketball was in the 90s. Make the tournament more often than not, win a game, and then that's what you're going to get. And probably that Sweet 16 run, I think, probably tainted a lot of people's memories of what it was for a decade.
Yeah, but it's been, solid. I think solid is a nice word. But one thing Fran hasn't really embraced a whole lot, and I think he'd fully admit this probably, that he's not one of those guys that's going to go out and sell the program kind of stuff. He leaves that to the marketing people. He's a basketball coach, and I think that's how he views himself. And that's a fair way to look at things. I mean, that's his job, is to be the coach of the basketball team, develop those players. But I think Iowa might need somebody who's just going to be a little more rah-rah on that stuff and be willing to go on, Miller and Condon from time to time and talk up the team and, go on different podcasts, things like that. I think that's something that would be effective for if there is a change that's made.
It does make a lot of sense. And I think there's so much that still needs to be done. I brought up, reinvigorate the primetime league. And even if, you and I is not involved anymore like they once were, even if it's just a couple of guys, and I don't know what the rules are now for those summer leagues that they're able to put together. I know Randy Larson did it, and sadly Randy's not with us anymore, but you need to bring something like that back because it's not about the box scores, right? It's not about anything like that. But think of, you went to those how many times? I went to those. I did a radio show from a primetime league 20 years ago now. It was something, though, it wasn't about the actual game. It was a talking point for you to write an article, for me to talk about on the air, for people at Casey's to talk about it. You need to get that back and get Iowa basketball back to being a conversation piece.
Yeah, or do something, and even last night where they were giving, $2 beers, $2 pretzels. And, God bless Hawkeye Elvis for, telling those guys, anybody in line that sends a picture, I'll Venmo you the money for your beer. I mean, that's him. He's a great dude. But, they didn't have many students there. There just weren't, just not many students there. So they've got to get that student population back. I think that's really important moving forward.
Basketball, it is now a fight to get into the Big Ten tournament. And sadly, as we talked about a week ago, our hopes of Vegas might be off the board. But and there's a few Hawkeye fans, I'm sure, that would have made that trip out there. We'll see about that on that front. Let's jump over to the women's basketball side. Want to talk to you about the matchup coming up this weekend. To be honest, I gave them no shot against USC. Of course, they pulled the shocker there. There's also a little extra juice in the building that day with Caitlin Clark on hand. This is a different one with UCLA. And if Lauren Betts is able to go, if she's even close to 100%, a post player like that, incredibly difficult to deal with. Do you give Iowa against a healthy UCLA team? Do you give them a shot on Sunday?
I give them a shot just because I just saw USC beat this UCLA team, this last week. So you never know getting on the road. But boy, I really do like the UCLA team. They're very good. They've got a lot of talent. They've got really good depth, I think, really good coach. So, it's going to be a busy weekend at Carver-Hawkeye when you got, the men's team hosting Washington. You got, UCLA, and you got the wrestlers on the mat Sunday night too against Okie State, number 2 versus number 3.
That will be a big one. Conclude the regular season. Oklahoma State, they've found some money in those couch cushions too for their wrestling program. As you saw with Drayshawn Ross, some of the speculation about that is maybe Oklahoma State and Iowa should combine forces to try to beat Penn State. Would that work?
They might, yeah. I think Oklahoma State's probably got a little oil money. There's money, and then there's oil money,
Right.
and the oil money is different, and it's more plentiful. And I think that's how you get Taylor down there. Is you tell him, hey, you're going to have X number of $1 million available to go out and shop. So that's like there's 3 programs in the country right now that have those resources that are going to be available to them, and that's Penn State, Iowa, and Oklahoma State. And magically, those are the 3 best programs in the sport this year.
So we have a lot going on in this changing, evolving world of college athletics, and with the NIL, the way that it's going to look going forward, the $20 million now. Title IX doesn't have to be split evenly like the previous regime or now the current regime says. No, we don't have to worry about that. There's so much changing. Everything is going on. When you look big picture, just at the University of Iowa, the athletic department for the University of Iowa, is Iowa in a good space going forward, not knowing exactly how this is all going to play out, how it's going to look? Do you believe that Iowa, though, as a whole, is in a good spot?
I do. I think Beth Getz has been planning for these days, and I think anybody in the Big Ten and the SEC is going to be in good shape because they're going to have the TV money that's coming in. Now, I do think, and this is just specifically about men's basketball in a lot of ways, but I think there's some naivete out there among some college administrators and such that think that just the house money is going to be enough to, and you don't need kind of what I'm calling the over the top money that is the traditional collective money right now. That's not going away, folks. I mean, there's still going to be that out there, and I think there's some folks who think that maybe that's just the collectives are going to go away. No, they're not. They'll be maybe a little bit different formation, and I'm just amused they're hiring an accounting firm, the NCAA, as I believe, to try and police fair market value for things that are paid to student athletes at various schools. How are you going to determine that? Good luck. It's going to be messy, but I think men's basketball at Iowa, they're getting, Chad Leistikow had a story this week mentioning that the men's basketball program is 1.5 million. And that's an accurate number, but that's the bottom probably 3 or 4 in the Big Ten right now. They've got to get that number in addition to what they're going to get from the house thing, which is probably 2.5, 3 million, I would think. They're going to have to get that up to 3 to 4 million on the outside stuff to, I think, elevate the program.
Little football talk to wrap things up. We're talking with Tom Kakert, HawkeyeReport.com, part of On3 Media. Want to first go to quarterback recruiting. So for my Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, I had our recruiting analyst that I talked to earlier in the week. He absolutely loves Cash Herrera. And he said if Peyton Falzone, if they can get a visit from him and get him locked up, he can't remember 2 guys that not just had the arm talent, Iowa's had arm talent guys, but coupled with the athleticism of both of these dudes. I want to start with Cash Herrera. Not a huge recruit when you kind of look at the national side of things, but this is somebody that Tim Lester identified right away. What you're continuing to hear about him?
Yeah, I think what I've been understood is that Tim is very interested in getting 2 guys in this class. They're open to it because there's guys that are going to be open to it. Because what you're seeing with quarterback recruiting is really interesting because there's a lot of schools that are just like, yeah, we're not probably going to do the high school thing anymore. We're just going to go find a quarterback every spring and in the portal or every fall or winter in the portal, and we're going to try and just do it that way. And so that means you're going to be able to get a Falzone all of a sudden who's really, really talented. I think he's more talented than Herrera, and you just got to take the kid and just and see if you can develop him. And I'll tell you this, Tim Lester loves Jimmy Sullivan too, who's the freshman quarterback. So they could kind of get a pretty nice little pipeline going. But here's the other part of the equation with quarterbacks, as we know, the most impatient position in the history of sport. If they're not playing, they're going to put their name in the portal and get somewhere where they can play. And generally, you don't play 2 of them at a time. So that's going to be the challenge moving forward. But this year it's probably going to be obviously Gronowski, and then we'll see what they do for backup.
Well, and the other part about the Falzone recruitment that's so interesting, he has a Penn State offer, but Penn State's already got a kid in this class, Troy Hoon, who's highly regarded himself. So is it a slow play, or are they just kind of keeping him back there? Because even if I would get a commitment from Falzone, and here's kind of the balancing act, if all of a sudden something changes with Penn State, or Hun maybe he's looking somewhere else all of a sudden. Now Falzone's back on the board here. This is a difficult balancing act with these quarterbacks.
It is. I would say it's like, especially sometimes with like a class of quarterback, I'd always wait. And a lot of guys are committing a little bit earlier, but there was always a point generally in the spring where dominoes just started to fall. And then they would just all, like, 1 week you'd have like 10 quarterbacks commit, because they're all kind of being recruited by the same programs in a lot of ways. And then one picks a school, then the next one, and they all just sort of fall in line. And you don't see that as much today, but boy, there's been a lot of years where that's happened.
Absolutely. What is left as we make our way to spring football? We'll have, on the football side of things, another window that will open late in the spring, another small window there. We know what cornerback is going to be a spot that they're going to be looking at that time. What else is Iowa going to be portaling with when we get to the spring period?
Yeah, I think corners, obviously one spot that they're going to really look at. I think they always keep their eye open at wide receiver. If something really interesting or intriguing pops up, I could see them going in that direction. I think they just kind of wait and just see what's out there. One thing that I saw last night that was interesting, because we had noticed that Hayden Large's name was on the roster still, and they had their little dance thing that they do every year with the football players and the cheerleaders last night. Hayden Large was out there with them, so it wasn't just like an oversight or mistake that I think he's still with the team. So I think we all thought he was done because he was, walked at senior day or whatever. But it seems like maybe Hayden Large is back, so that kind of helps them with that fullback, H-back, tight end kind of position, and a little more depth with Ostrenga and with Zach Ortworth there.
Going to be an interesting offseason. Spring football begins late March this year. Did they push it back a little bit later? It feels a little later.
The calendar fall. Yeah, I think the calendar just kind of makes it fall a little bit later. So it'll be like that, maybe the last week of March when they get going. But they usually have their pro day that Monday, and then they start practice on that Wednesday.
Good. We need that. You know why we need that? Because we need content, local content in April and May. So push that thing back. Get through basketball, then we can get into the football. I like the way that this thing's set up, Tom.
Absolutely. Same with me.
Well, Tom, appreciate your time. You guys got a ton going on. Obviously, the wrestling coverage. You got the basketball coverage, football recruiting with Blair. You guys doing a great job over at Hawkeye Report, part of On3 Media. Tom, appreciate it. I know it's a day early. Really do appreciate you jumping on with us today.
Anytime, my friend. Anytime.
That is Tom Kakert, HawkeyeReport.com. Wrapping things up, it's Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you once again. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Just takes you a moment, helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. And if you're listening on the podcast side, we're looking for some more Apple reviews. Go over there. We're looking for good ones. I mean, that's what we're hoping for. And if you stuck with us this long, I would hope that you could help us out and give us one of those. Wrapping things up. So we have a weekend in front of us. Mentioned that Oklahoma State Iowa wrestling meet, the final regular season duel. I really do like the setup of that. Yeah, not ending with a Big Ten duel. I know that's a little bit different, but it's turned into such a fun series. And obviously the history of the two programs go hand in hand with Oklahoma State and Iowa ending the season, or one of the last duels, certainly of the year, each and every year. I like the structure of that one. Iowa baseball, what they have in front of them, lose 2 out of 3 against South Florida. Starting pitching was really good over the weekend. They got a couple of big games coming up this week as well. The Iowa softball team, need to take a glance at them and kind of see how things are going. But this weekend, more than anything, it's going to be, to me, about what happens in that matchup against UCLA. And if the Iowa women really have an opportunity to pull off what would be a huge upset, really bolster that resume and the conversation we've had, getting up to the 6 line, how important that would be for this team to make a run, to have the ability to get into the second weekend. I believe it has to come from that spot, the more likely spot, I should say, coming from that spot. That means getting wins, and it's either beating UCLA or Michigan, wrapping it up with a win at home against Wisconsin to wrap up the season. That's what's still in front of them here. Monday disappointment aside, losing to Ohio State after roaring back to force overtime in that one. So that's what I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. We got you covered here. Coming up on tomorrow's program, mentioned talking with Tom there, Scott Docterman is going to be freshly back from New Orleans and the SEC Big Ten meetings that were happening there. So we'll get some insight into that. Iowa football, this new structure of the college football playoff, it's a good thing for Iowa football. Not great for the sport, but good for Iowa football. We'll explain that on tomorrow's program. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.